One is that anyone who's performing assessment has to know the domestic violence issues specifically. And what's happening in the US and other places is that psychologists end up providing these assessments as you would for other kinds of issues where the person has no understanding of the dynamics of domestic violence. And in particular, there's a tendency to call these cases high conflict divorces. And that term has become very, very widespread in use. And it's unfortunately a very misleading term because, first of all, there's a remarkable lack of research into these so-called high conflict cases. But they also fail to separate out cases that involve a history of the abuse of the children or abuse towards mother. It doesn't make any sense to refer to a case as a high conflict divorce when the issue is that one parent is trying to protect her children from the other parent. The problem there is not the conflict. The problem there is the abuser. And when we call it a high conflict divorce, we're naming the conflict as the problem rather than the history of abuse as a problem. And what happens when you make that mistaken frame is that your focus becomes how to help resolve the conflict between the parents, rather than how do we hold the abuser accountable and get him or her to change, require that person to change. And this is really the predominant mistake in divorce work globally at the moment, is to be focused on resolving conflict, which is relevant for other kinds of tense divorces, but is not relevant for divorces that involve a history of abuse. And most really tense, in other words, lastingly tense divorces do involve histories of abuse. So the whole notion of high conflict divorce is actually focused on a very small percentage of cases. There is not a large percentage of cases that are very hard, where the divorce remains very hard to resolve years later, unless there's a history of abuse towards the children or abuse towards mom. And tensions are often very difficult to resolve in the immediate aftermath as the couple is breaking up and for the next 1 to 2 years. But overwhelmingly, those tensions go down as the years go by if there's not an abuser in the picture. When there is an abuser in the picture, you cannot somehow teach communication skills or teach conflict resolution skills. This is a huge error that is made so much in the divorce and custody field, is to look at these cases and say, oh, well, this man has very poor conflict resolution skills. He has very poor communication skills. Or often they blame the couple. They say the couple is lacking in these skills. And so we're going to teach them these skills. And that's a completely misguided response to a domestic abuse case, because his lack of skills is not the issue. His abusiveness is the issue. He can have all the skills in the world. He's not going to use them because he's a bully. And so the fundamental frame of how we do assessment has to be governed by our policies, because our policies need to say, if there's a history of abuse or even allegations of a history of abuse, those allegations have to be properly investigated. Here's the steps. Here's what the investigation needs to look like. And then here are the concerns that have to be addressed before a parenting plan is made.